Hey now, PD Grizz here. So, yeah, I wrapped up the restoration on this, 1923 officer's knife the other day, and I kind of rushed showing it at the end. So I figured I would just do this video and do some more closer looks at the actual knife rather than just running through it because my dog was barking. Because he's taking a nap right now, so I could sneak a video in real quick. But yeah, this is red burlap micarta. It looked like this when I got it. So you can actually see, like, it's, like a burlap sack material that's been dyed red and then layered in epoxy. That's how micarta is made. G10 is basically a fiberglass made with epoxy. It's not fiberglass, it's similar to fiberglass. Even the vulcanized fiber, they're all very similar idea. It's basically a matrix suspended in a resin or something like that. But this, I thought, matched pretty closely to the original scales. Let me see if I got one of the original scales here. So, yeah, like, these scales were pretty light, so they're a little darker. But I've seen these darker too, like, not quite this dark, but almost this dark. So I thought it looked pretty good. I even sent a picture to somebody who would definitely be considered an expert, and they didn't even realize at first that they weren't the original scales. But they were just like, wait, what are you talking about? Micarta. I was like, that's micarta. But it does have this rough look. That's because the burlap is suspended between, is basically suspended in the epoxy. So this is polished because that's actually the epoxy on top. But in some areas you can see where it gets down to the fiber. And that's what gives micarta its great texture. It feels like it's got a texture like cloth. You can almost feel like the fibers in there. It gives a very good grip. It handles water very well. It's just a good material to work with. It's a little difficult to work with because as you're sanding, it's hard to see how level stuff is. It kicks up so much dust. And then I would sand it down and I thought I had it good. And then I'd take some pictures of it and look at the pictures. And in pictures, I could see all kinds of spots that I couldn't see with my naked eye. So that I'd start over again. And the other thing that comes with sanding is it's easy to overdo it with sanding. You can have something and you think you think there's still a little too much material left, and next thing you know, you went too far. So sometimes the key is to know when to call it stop. So the scales are by no means perfect, but I think they're perfect for this knife because they just have the right character. They look like they've been on there forever, even though they're only a few days old. So, the rivets came out really good. This is, one of the first knives. I've done a few. I've replaced a few bales and stuff. This is one of the first knives I've completed with exposed rivets, and I'm really happy. Although I fixed a bunch of them, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I've gotten better at peening them, and they're nice and smooth, and they're round. Sometimes they can easily get egg-shaped, or they can easily bend over. Like, there's so much that can go wrong while peening them. So to get all the pins perfect is just amazing feeling. Even the bail. I'm thinking about taking the bail off. I mean, it's on either end, the bails. I really don't like carrying knives with bails. I do it all the time. A lot of my favorite knives have bails. They look really cool, but I just don't like them in function. And I do want to use this knife. So I'm thinking about taking the bail off. But yeah, they line up nice with the liners. Everything is nice and flush. They're pretty even. I'm sure they're not perfectly even. I'm sure if I took out a set of calipers, I'd find they're all wonky and stuff. But they're pretty even. And importantly, everything is nice and flush and tight with the liners. The tools don't wobble. Yeah, it's great. This awl is beautiful. It's nice and full. It's not broken at the end or worn away, because these tips get pretty fine, and you do find them a lot of times. They've been worn down and stuff, so it's pretty cool. The 5-turn corkscrew was bent all in like 3 different ways. It was like the worst thing you do with a corkscrew is only put it in like halfway and then pull on it, and then it gets twisted in the middle. Don't do that. Always drive the corkscrew all the way in. But it's actually, it sits about as straight as I can get it. It's not perfect, but it's as good as it's going to get. It sits nice and squarely in there. There's a little bit of deviation in it, but I don't think any more than was originally there when it was just made out of a twisted piece of wire. Here's the ends. And here's another neat thing that most people don't notice about Swiss Army knives. These older ones, and even up into the 50s, they're tapered. They are not parallel from end to end. Here's a 50s one I can show you too. They actually, this one you can definitely see it in that whole outside on the top. If this bottom scale was level right now, you'd see the angle on the top scale. They're wider at the clip blade end. And that makes sense because when the main blade is out, it gives your hand, there's a slight swell to this end, almost like a Barlow or something like that. The knife is fatter at this end. And you can actually, the spring for that layer is actually tapered. It is fatter. It's probably a millimeter or so. It's not much, but it's enough that it's noticeable. And because of that, like, yeah, it's just, it's interesting. And a lot of these knives, like a lot of the parts in here are parallel. Like, you'll notice this liner actually goes out away from this corkscrew. I never noticed that before. All you can do is bend it down in there, but this one does it a little bit too, because the corkscrew is set up as if the liners are parallel. The corkscrew is as thick as the spring is there, but the spring's thicker down here. So this whole liner is on a wedge shape. And I didn't notice that till messing with these older knives, that they're not here's a more modern one, and these liners are parallel. It's not thicker at one end or the other. But then this one, you can see those ends are about the same thickness. Those ends are about the same thickness. See, that end is about a millimeter thicker. It's not much of a difference, but it's there, and I can't unsee it now. I notice it right away when I'm looking at one of these things. So we've got the can opener. The can opener clicks open good, doesn't click shut good. The spring is not for this knife. Sometimes the best you can do is the best you can do. You know, so I will fix more of them. I'm keeping my eye out for a spring. I think I know, I think if I can find a beat up later one, not like this spring is from like probably a 60s knife. If I could find one from like the 40s or the 30s, I think it might work better. So I'll keep an eye out for one, because I would have no problem drilling this out right now and ripping it all apart and starting over. It wouldn't bother me one bit. But I definitely like where it is now, although I'm probably taking this bail off. Now here is, to me, this is my favorite feature of this knife, and it's having the screwdriver. Like, as soon as you see the screwdriver without the cap lifter, you know you're into the early stuff. And this is, you know, I would think is towards the end of the cap lifters. According to Victorinox, they started using cap lifters in 1942, and that's just wrong. There's no way they waited that long. I know I have 30s knives that have cap lifters on them. That might be the first time it appeared in the catalog or something like that. But they definitely had them in the 20s. Wenger used them as early as 1918. So I doubt Victorinox, was dragging in the back of the line too long on that deal. But yeah, in the screwdriver, it doesn't close great. It's got a weird arc because it's not the right spring. So there's no like half stop. Like once you pass here, it just wants to flip closed. But it's still working its way loose. As I use it, it'll probably get better. The important thing is that nothing wobbles in this knife. Nothing wobbles. It's just beautiful. Everything is nice and tight. There's no wobble. And again, we've got the Victorinox stamp on the back. Supposedly, according to Elsonox charts, that stamp is from 1923 to 1930. and I would expect this to be closer to the beginning of that. This stamp, Army Swiss, they used from the beginning of the officers line going back to 1897. Very cool. And finally, we've got the clip blade, or what's left of it. Somebody did a lot of sharpening out here. This clip blade should have come down a little bit out here, but a lot of times the way people use a sharpening stone, doing this away from them, they tend to eat more material up around here and just flatten the whole thing out. But luckily it's still got the clip shape. I'm still very happy that it's intact at all, because this could easily have been lost to the sands of time. But yeah, I am glad I moved the bail to the other end, though. I don't like the bail on this end. I don't like it on this end either. I'm probably just going to take the thing off as soon as I'm done this video, because I'm sick of it. And, you know, for those of you asking me how to drill the pins out, it's just a delicate operation. Obviously, if your drill slips and you hit the scale's shot, and the scales are tight, you can't just pull the scales over the pins. You can't, like, you would just ruin them. So what I do is I take a nail set. I also have a jeweler's block, but I don't do it in this position. I do it on the corner of the table because I'm working on just a normal desk. It's not a workbench, so it's too flimsy. So I do it right on the corner, but I, you know, give it a couple bops with the hammer, and I kind of work it around and make a nice divot in the center of the head. And that kind of keeps the drill bit from walking off, because I'm doing it by hand. If you have a drill press and you can just clamp this in place and run the drill press down, you're golden. I'm going to get a drill press down the line, because I just keep taking apart more knives. Every time I take apart a knife, I'm like, I should just take the money from one knife and buy a drill press, and then I could blow these things out. Because honestly, it takes the hardest part of fixing these knives for me is taking them apart. Like, once I got them apart, I'm golden. Like, but taking them apart, especially the exposed rivet ones, and having to avoid damaging the scales if I want to reuse the scales, that's nerve-wracking. And if I had a drill press, it would just be like, boop, done, no problem. The fact that I can do it with a hand drill is fantastic, though, because it's just way more convenient than me having a drill press here in my office. Yeah, so I'm very proud of fixing this knife up. I think if you're really into collecting the knives and you've got knives you want to fix, give a try fixing them yourself, especially the ones with the hidden rivets. They're not that hard. There's no mystery here. The hardest part is the skill involved in you know, setting the rivets and stuff. But even that's not hard if you got common sense. If you're mechanically inclined, this is a fairly easy job. It's just the kind of job that it's not technically challenging, but it does require quite a bit of skill and patience to do it right. There's just several things that you can screw up and just screw the whole knife up. And yeah, but man, she's a beaut. I love these old knives. I need to find an older one now. I think I got something coming from 1905. It's not a Victorinox though, but it's a German knife. But I think I got one from 1905 coming tomorrow. I'm excited to get that one in the shop and check it out. Yeah. So anyway, that is the end of the other end. Thanks for watching. Don't roll away. Knife. Petey Grizz out.